Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Coach podcast. As always, I'm your host, Micheal Pacheco. And today with me, I have Gregg Ward. Gregg has lived more than 4 different lives: a theater actor, writer, and director in New York and London, a specialist trainer for the New York City Police Department, a freelance correspondent for BBC Radio and other UK media, and what he does now, serving as an executive coach, consultant, and facilitator to global companies and governments on respect and respectful leadership. He's also the author of the award-winning, best-selling fable, The Respected Leader, and has delivered over 2,700 different keynotes, talks, seminars, and workshops in North America, Europe, and the Middle East over the past 25 years. Gregg Ward, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. I always open the podcast by simply inviting our guests to talk a little bit more about yourself and maybe a little bit about your why and what got you into coaching.
That is a great question. You know, a lot of my life has been kind of falling into something. It hasn't necessarily been planned, but I got exposed to something. I got excited by it. So I started to flow down that path. Now, thank you. Specifically, how I got into coaching is I had a very robust training and consulting firm that I founded in the late 90s. And then in 2001, when 9/11 hit, I got the call from my major client saying, stop everything, we're done. And it was a shock to me. And I realized that I needed to broaden what I do and my offerings. So I signed up for an executive coach training program here in San Diego, where I'm based. And it was an 18-month, it was incredibly rigorous. It was a very serious program. And at the end of it, I came out of it fully credentialed, and I've been doing coaching ever since, mostly with leaders in global corporations as well as teams, and mostly in the areas of leadership, what we all call the soft skills, which are really the hardest skills of all, and managing conflict, helping people with relationships, and so on and so forth. So that's what I do now.
Nice. Who are your typical clients?
Well, my typical clients will be the C-suite executives for major global companies. These are folks who are very, very successful. They got there because they solve problems and they move quickly. And on occasion, they would run roughshod over people and generate some negative blowback on them as leaders. And so they got to that point in their careers where they realized that the negative impacts were undermining their success. And they reached out looking for someone who could help them, or they had other people say to them, you know, you could probably do with some coaching to help you with your leadership skills. So most of my clients come to me by referral, or because they've heard about me, read my book, and so on and so forth.
Okay. And with your focus around respectful leadership, it sounds like maybe some of your clients, or maybe your ideal clients, perhaps have been burned in the past, shall we say, because they're assertive people, right? These are naturally incredibly assertive people.
Yes.
With charisma and egos to match.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also they came up through the ranks in a way that many of us are no longer doing. Many of them started at the bottom of their organizations. I was just reading about the CEO of Walmart, who literally started as a part-time stocking clerk.
Wow.
Years and years ago, and worked his way up to CEO.
Wow.
So that was how it was done. And in some companies, that's still how it's done. And when you join a company fresh out of college, what have you, there is an expectation that you're going to start at the bottom and work your way up. And you won't necessarily be treated with the utmost of respect. In fact, there's an assumption, hey, you're the newbie, and this certainly happened to me when I started in the workforce. You're the newbie, you're gonna have to put up with all the scut work. And you're gonna have to work your way up, and you're gonna have to earn our respect. Well, that's changed. That's changed dramatically. The world of work has changed fundamentally. For example, our workforce will be by 2025 dominated by millennials and Gen Z. There's just no question about it. They are the most educated generation to ever join the workforce. They are also the most diverse. And one more thing that I know about them, because I have 3-generation millennial children, they survived the Great Recession of 2008 through 2011. They saw their friends' parents lose their homes. They saw their parents lose their jobs, literally being thrown out of work because things went bad. So they're not stupid, these millennials, and they now sit in the driver's seat. As we all know, we are having all of our companies are having a really hard time finding highly qualified candidates. That wasn't the case years ago. So I'm not saying we have to kowtow to them. I'm not saying we have to bend over backwards for them. What I am saying is that they have an expectation of being treated with respect. And all the research, all the data that we have done here at the center makes it really clear that if you treat people with respect from the very get-go, when they join your organization, they're going to be more productive, they're going to be more loyal, they're going to go the extra mile when the going gets tough, and they're more likely to stay resilient. So these are all really, really good reasons to treat newcomers and young people with respect. It actually does pay off.
And how do you, as you're working with C-suite executives, what sort of, I guess my question is, what does a typical engagement with you look like?
Okay,
how do you work with people on this?
That's an excellent question. It's one of two things. They're either reaching out to me because a colleague or even they themselves have realized that they're stuck, that they're not as effective as they used to be. They're having problems and they're not quite sure what it's all about, putting their finger on it. They just can't figure it out and they want help. Or someone saying to them, you had better get coached or else. Now, obviously, I'd much prefer the former, somebody who's really interested in it. But if I do get, and I would say more than 50% of my referrals are people who are being told you need coaching. And that's a bad place to start. I think you would agree. So what I've got to, I'm very upfront with them. I said, look, I wish you weren't coming to me because there's a sort of Damocles hanging over your head. You're being told to change or else, and you don't quite understand why. You've been successful all these years. You've done all this great work, and now all of a sudden you're pissing people off and you don't know why. And why aren't they just getting over it? Why is everybody so sensitive? Why do I have to walk around on eggshells? I get where you're coming from. And I'm willing to help you if you're willing to be helped. But if you're just going to sit here and whine and complain about how the millennials are a bunch of crybabies and a bunch of politically correct people who just can't take it in the real world, then I'm not interested, because you don't want to be helped. You don't want to change. You just want to complain about others. And those people, if they do start that with me, I'm too old. I'm too old. I'm just like, dude, I'm going to hit you once with a very hard 2x4 covered with velvet. And if you still don't want to see it from another point of view, then go find somebody else, because I cannot help you. I do not have the time or the inclination to your hand while you grow up. I'm sorry I'm so rude about it, but I don't have the patience anymore for arrogant senior executives who think their poop doesn't stink.
Yeah, that's
sorry. That's kind of blunt, isn't it?
No, that's great. Since we're talking about generations here, I got to ask: are you a boomer or are you Gen Xer? Because you sound like a Gen Xer.
Yeah, I'm kind of a mix. I'm a mutt. I'm actually on the cusp. I was born in 1960. They say the boomer generation ended in 63.
Okay.
I've been doing this work for so long in so many ways. I don't know what generation I'm a part of. I do know this. When I started, I was treated like crap. I was not respected when I started in the workforce. And I assumed that was just the way things were. And eventually I grew to realize that no, it doesn't have to be that way. And actually organizations where people are treated with respect actually have long-term, very positive business outcomes.
I think, I mean, doesn't this must go back, hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's a very like fraternity. It's a fraternal thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
To haze the newbie.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And also remember, what were the leadership styles that we grew up with? One was command and control. I mean, how many of us had parents who said, my dad did, who said, do as I say because I'm your father? Okay, that was it. And so that kind of leadership style gets transferred right into the workplace, and people assume, okay, I'm the boss, so you need to do what I say. But that doesn't work anymore. Even if it didn't work at one time, it was more accepted. But now that really, really doesn't work unless we're in an urgent situation or an urgent kind of culture, such as the military, police, firefighting, and so on, where command and control culture is what saves lives. But most of us aren't doing that. In our C-suite corporate executives. I know everything's urgent and there's millions of dollars at stake, but at the end of the day, all our research tells us that you try to command and control people in your workplace, you're just going to piss them off. Better to try to influence them and use respect as the grease that creates the influencing going forward.
For sure. Yeah. Software development at Intel or quality assurance at Amazon, the stakes are not that high.
No.
Lives are not on the line.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And I find that once senior executives, I kind of explain that, and I actually show them the data. I have a whole bunch of companies that we here have studied, ones that have respectful cultures and ones that don't. And we show them the metrics. Metrics will blow you away. And a lot of them, especially from the tech companies, the people who've got their PhDs in computer science or what have you, or engineering, these folks were never introduced to these concepts. I understand that. And they didn't succeed because they understood all about psychological safety and emotional intelligence. That they didn't cover that stuff. And they were successful during the early years because they did all this wonderful stuff with technology and engineering. That's great. But once you start to lead people, there's a whole different skill set that's involved. And you can't just take what you've done in the past and assume that it's going to work in the future. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to circle back to what an engagement with you looks like. What is the actual coaching?
Sure. I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question. Okay.
No, you're good. No, you're good. I mean, you did answer part of the question, but I'm also curious to know what does the actual coaching part look like? How do you take these old school curmudgeons and turn them into,
I like that word, curmudgeon.
and turn them into respecting human beings, leaders?
That is an excellent question. And so it really depends on their willingness. If they have a willingness to learn, we can work really, really quickly. In as little as 3 months, over the course of maybe 6 to 8 sessions, we can make a lot of progress. And very often what happens is I'll be engaged for 3 months, and people will, at the end of 3 months, they'll say, wow, this was great. I learned a lot. I've started to change. Can you stick with me for another 3 months? So the very first couple of meetings is really me assessing willingness to learn and willingness to change. And if I get the sense that they want to do that, we can work really quickly. If they don't, I'm either going to shut it down right at the get-go and say, I can't help you, or I'm going to see if I can tease them and say, hey, can you hang with me for another session? Would you be willing to at least do one more session, see if you can get some value out of this? And I might do a little bit of psychological manipulation. I might say something to the effect, maybe this isn't for you, but maybe one of your kids might come to you one day and say, hey, I'm being disrespected at work. I don't know what to do. And maybe what I teach you here might be useful to you as a parent. That'll usually get them. I
think we can all agree that you can't help someone who doesn't want to help themselves.
Nope.
You can't.
No. And it's really hard to help someone who's been told by their leadership, you change or else. Again, If they've been super successful, we see this a lot with heads of sales, for example, biz dev. These folks have kind of been the charming, outgoing, doing their thing. Hey, don't get in their way. Let them do their thing. But then they go over the line in some way or another, and people freak out. And then I get the call, hey, can you fix them? We love them. We value them. They're the reason we're so successful. So can you fix them? And I say, no guarantees whatsoever. It's up to them whether they want to be fixed.
Yeah. Do you get paid regardless? What is that part of the?
Yes. My agreement is you're going to give me an upfront deposit that's non-refundable.
Yeah.
Usually that's 1/3 of the overall cost. And then the second third is paid about halfway through, and the final third is paid at the end.
Yeah.
And my contracts are bulletproof. I have a wonderful attorney who basically, no matter what happens, I'm going to get paid up until the end of that, of whatever period that is. If we get through 1/3, I keep it. Even if I stop it after the second session, just say I can't help this, I get that third. And then the second third is purely a focus of how many meetings have had and so on.
I want to go on a little bit of a tangent here,
Sure.
but we don't get an opportunity to talk about legal aspects and contracts very often on this podcast. How important have bulletproof contracts been for you in your business and in your career?
Generally speaking, I like to say, sure, I could do this on a handshake, but I won't. Simply because most people are decent and honor their contracts. Until I did that fairly early on in my career, roughly 20 years ago. And I did a handshake. The whole thing blew up. The person quit, filed lawsuits, named me in the lawsuit. It was an absolute something show, which I never want to go through again. It cost me a lot of money, which I recovered, because at the end of the day, the lawsuit was thrown out and I recovered all of my expenses. But it was 2 years of my life and a lot of gray hair that I could have done without losing. So at the end of the day, I now make sure my contracts are 100% bulletproof.
I mean, yeah, that's great. That's great. And I'll take gray hair over losing the hair.
Yeah. Good point.
You've got a process that you've developed as you work with your clients on this. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you so much for asking. I really appreciate you doing that. It's called coaching for respect. Now, typically when two people in an organization, let's say it's a boss and their subordinate, lose respect for one another, or both lose it for each other, it's usually because one or the other has behaved in a way that the other finds disrespectful to some degree or more. And there's kind of a laundry list of behaviors which fall short of legal policy, crossing over the line, like sexual harassment or something like that. But it's still like bullying. It's still problematic. So what I say to, I usually get the call from HR. Hey, we got these two people. They've lost respect for each other. It's starting to impact their work, and it's also impacting the work of the people that they work with. Can you help them? And I say, well, let me give it a shot. Let me see, once again, right from the get-go, are they willing to examine their relationship and make a good faith effort at trying to repair it? If they are, I say, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to meet with you individually, and I'm going to cover some neuroscience on respect, why people lose respect for each other, how it can be repaired. I'm going to take you through the mechanics and help you understand what you're going to go through. And so I'll have a number of individual meetings with the parties before I bring them together. I might also do assessments with them. I'm certified in DISC, I'm certified in Hogan, and a number of other assessments like Myers-Briggs. So I'll do the most appropriate assessment, and then I will get a really good sense of where they stand in their relationship and the negative impacts on them and the organization. And eventually, it's a 10-step process. Eventually, I will bring them together once they have a really good idea of how they want individually, they want this this relationship repaired? What are they willing to own in their own behavior? What are they willing to apologize for if it's needed? And lastly, what are they willing to change and work on going forward? Then I bring them together, and it's like a mediation. I'm trained as a mediator, and I take them through step by step by step, recovering everything that went, clarifying everything, whatever apologies need to happen, and then we lay out a map and a plan and a strategy for moving forward. They sign it, and then we do some check-ins afterwards. I can tell you that 50% of the time this works, and it works well if people really want to repair the relationship.
Yeah.
But 50% of the time it doesn't work, and I have to shut it down pretty early on, simply because one or the other believes that the other person has engaged in what we call an unrightable wrong. The person stepped over a line, disrespected them in such a way that they feel so aggrieved and so upset and so angry that they will never want to work with that person again. And if that's the case, I'll try to coach them past it. And if I can't coach them past it, I'll just go back to the company. I'll say, I'm sorry, I cannot help. In this case, you're going to have to look to other measures to resolve this.
In those cases, I'm guessing, and please, I mean, this is a kind of a question, but I'm going to pose it as a guess. I'm guessing that the error is actually on the aggrieved person's part, right? It's their ego kind of getting in the way. They don't want to go through the work of forgiving that person.
Right. Yes. And it's also possible that the other person engaged in such disrespectful behavior that any reasonable person, and it also, there's a difference between reasonable woman and reasonable man. In many situations, any reasonable person might say, yeah, that was over the line. I wouldn't want to work with that person either. So it is, we often say to them at the beginning, it takes two to tango. And each of you had a role in how this relationship soured. However, it's entirely possible one person was the provocateur. One of the two did something that was really egregious. And then it's up to the other person to be willing to accept their apology and forgive them. And sometimes some people just cannot do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. On a totally different note, where do you find your clients? How do you market yourself? How do you get more clients?
That's a great question. We do attend mostly HR conferences and learning and development conferences. We have a whole suite of programs that on respect that we can deliver either in person or virtually. We also have an e-learning suite. And we also have a number of clients. We've been doing this for a long time. People know who we are. They reach out to us, or they'll do a Google search on respect and disrespectful leadership. We come up and they reach out to us. So generally speaking, we get a lot of our clients by referrals. Our coaching clients come by referrals. And I also am a part of many different coaching networks like the Association for Corporate Executive Coaches and ICF, and you name it. I've kind of been involved in doing this work for a long time.
Nice. Very good. What about, can you talk about some big wins that you guys have had?
Sure. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you for asking. These are great questions. These are great questions. Okay.
I appreciate it.
So I'm going to go back a few years to a senior manager and their direct report. He was a man, she was a woman. Both very good people, decent people. And he was lacking in emotional intelligence. Highly trained, highly educated, a real go-getter. And he just was a kind of a bull in the china shop. And his direct report, a woman who was younger than he was okay with that for a long, long time. But then she felt humiliated in front of her colleagues by him. He didn't even know he'd done it. He just, and this is very often the case, that some folks are just completely unaware. They just go their unconscious normal behaviors. They do their thing. And because he was in senior leadership, no one ever called him on his behavior. Well, she called him on it. And she did it in a very formal way through HR. So it blew up immediately. And fortunately, I knew the head of HR, and she called me and she said, here's what we got. And I said, I get it. Let me talk to them. And I ran this process, the coaching for respect process with them. And I'll be honest with you, not only was she crying because she was so uncomfortable with having to basically confront this guy with his behavior that he'd kind of gotten away with for a long time. But he felt so ashamed. Once he understood what he'd done, he broke down. He was so sorry. And you could tell he wasn't faking it. This rocked his world.
Wow.
It changed his whole life. And he went home. He started to repair the relationship with his wife, with his kids, his direct reports. He went on a campaign throughout his organization apologizing for treating people the way he had treated them, which is basically he'd bullied people for most of his career. And he thanked her 1,000 times. They are still working together. Every now and then I hear from them, and they've referred me additional work. They're still working together. They have a fantastic relationship. And I consider that my best win of all. I'm very, very proud of that one.
That's great. That's amazing. So no one had called him out on his shit before.
No, that's the problem. When you reach a certain level in an organization, no one has the courage to call you on your shit unless it's a colleague or a buddy.
Yeah. It's got to be a peer or a superior or a friend outside of the company altogether.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's so true.
Interesting.
Now can I tell you about a big failure I had?
That's my next question.
All right.
Tell me about a time when you really screwed something up and you've learned from it.
I screwed something up really badly. I got a call. It was a healthcare, and it was the head of a hospital, all the physicians, the head of the physicians group, who said to me, I've got folks in one of the departments, I won't name it. These physicians are at each other's throats. And can you help? And I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can help. Let me try. Well, the mistake I made is I took the head physician's word for it when she said it's not that big a deal. It was a huge deal. It was much bigger than she was letting on. And I only found out after the fact she was minimizing it, because she didn't understand about interpersonal dynamics. She was a surgeon. Interpersonal relationships, communication, that was not her scope of skills.
She's a cutter.
Yeah, a very successful surgeon. But she didn't know from interpersonal communications at all.
Surgeons don't necessarily need that bedside manner kind of thing.
No, not at all. Not at all. Although I think surgeons can always benefit from it. But the point is, I took her word on it. She kind of minimized the whole thing. She said, a couple of sessions with these guys together, I'm sure you'll fix it. And I thought, oh, okay. It doesn't sound like it was so much worse. So much worse. The mistake I made was only listening to that person. I should have said, look, I am not going to get. And of course they said, we don't have much money. And that was stupid. I needed the work at that time. This is a while ago. And so of course I said, yeah, I think I can help. And I kind of waded into it I did not give the usual caveats that I now give, where I say, there's no way I'm making any guarantees that I can fix anything until I talk to the parties privately. And I didn't do that in this case. I just took her word for it, and it blew up. It was very, very bad. And it didn't end well for me or for them. So never again.
Yeah.
Never again.
Do you do 360-degree assessments or stuff like that now?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Get a bigger, fuller picture of the situation?
It always depends on the situation. If I'm running the coaching for respect process and both parties agree and the organization is in agreement, and I strongly urge them to do so. Not only do they do assessments like the Hogan or the DISC or what have you, but I also make sure I do a 360 as well. I want to find out from all the different parties involved what's going on here, not just from the two individuals. But it does take, that's not cheap. It's not cheap. It's a process. And when they balk at the price, I say, look, we could do this, and we can give it a good faith try, and it's going to take some effort and time and expense, or we could not do this, and they could fall out, and you're looking at legal getting involved and lawsuits and all that kind of stuff. And that's going to cost a heck of a lot more than if you give me a shot at the get-go. And that usually gets them to say, okay.
Interesting.
But I will turn work down. If my spidey sense goes off, I don't care what they want to pay me. Yeah. And I did that just last month. I got a call, big, very successful company. And as soon as I heard what was going on, I said, nah, no. If you'd called me a year ago when this started, maybe I could have helped, but you waited too long. Well, we thought it would work itself out. No, it never does. It always grows from a molehill to a big mountain. So call me earlier next time, but I don't want anything to do with this. I can't help.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We've talked about kind of, personalities and egos and this sort of thing a couple different times in our short chat so far, but I want to pose maybe the same question or a similar question in a different way, because I think it's a complex topic, and asking different questions in different ways, I think we can come to different answers, I guess. But I wonder how humility is, and the openness to being wrong, I feel like has got to be very, very, has to be central to allow you to do what you do.
That is a brilliant observation.
For the people that you work with, right?
Yes. They have to be willing to own their shit.
Right.
If you don't mind me saying that.
Yeah.
And usually when I come at them from a place of, look, I'm not here to shame you. I'm not here to humiliate you. And I'm not here to fix you. I can help you if you want to be helped. So let's take a look at what happened from a factual point of view, and then try to look at the different perspectives here. And if you're willing to see how this incident was perceived by others, and how you might be playing a role in it, then by golly, maybe we can work something out here, and you can go forward and own your shit and move on from there, and you'll be a better person for it.
So that's kind of was the question that I was trying to get to is, do you, when you first come in and you sense a gigantic ego? Yeah. What sort of, if any, what sort of steps, tactics do you use, coaching methodologies do you go through in order to help this person help themselves? Now, obviously, like we said before, you can't help someone who doesn't want to help themselves. Right. But when you first meet with someone, I think there's probably some opportunity for you to expose them to another realm of possibility. There may be another reality beyond yours. Yes, absolutely. And so here's what I do usually, especially when I deal with a senior executive who says to me, I don't know why I'm here. I don't understand why you're here. I don't know why I'm in this room with you. That's got to be hard. It's really hard. And I'll just say, hey, I got a call. Something happened. It seemed to upset some people. Now, I've been doing this work for 20 plus years. If you'll give me a little bit of time to explain how that might be a problem, I think maybe you'll see why you're here. But if you're just going to sit there with your arms folded and say, this is a bunch of politically correct snowflake BS, then let's not waste each other's time. I often say this, look, I'm going to get paid. I have already got my deposit. That's non-refundable. I'm getting paid. So I can either walk out of here now, or I can try to help my best to help you, which I will. I'm going to say to them, I'm on your side. I'm on the other person's side too.
I'm just trying to help if you'll let me. But if you don't want to be helped, that's fine. Let's not waste each other's time. It's been nice knowing you. And I've sometimes had to do the old stand up from the table and reach out my hand before they'll say, okay, all right, sit down. Tell me what you need to tell me. The egos.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
just,
that's what you're getting when you walk into that room, right? Because you're working with C-suite executives and Fortune 500 companies, global companies.
And fortunately, I just turned 62, and I may not look it, and I'm glad I don't, but I can say, look, I just turned 62. I don't have time for this bullshit. You want to talk about this? Great. I'll give it my all. But if you think this is a waste of your time, forget it. I used to be so solicitous and say, give me a chance. I don't have time for that anymore.
If you think this is a waste of your time, it is definitely a waste of my time.
Exactly.
I respect the hell out of that. I like that a lot.
Thank you. Well, the other thing I also say, don't say anything, but let me take you down the road of how this is going to go.
Yeah.
You tell me you don't want to deal with this. You're not interested. This is a bunch of politically correct bullshit. Okay, got it. I go back and I tell HR and legal that that's what you said, because it's exactly what I'm going to say. And I'm going to say, this guy's uncoachable. So you, HR and legal, need to decide what you're going to do next, because I'm telling you, with somebody like this probably isn't the first time, and it's definitely not going to be the last time. So sooner or later, this is going to get a lot bigger. And I tell them that. I'll tell them that. I said, this is going to get a lot bigger, and you're going to wish that you had sat here with me and done a little bit of coaching and maybe heard a different perspective, rather than the shit show that's going to come down the pike later on. Now it's the ones who say they can't touch me, nothing's going to happen to me. I'm like, great, I'm out of here. By the way, I'm going to say exactly what I just said to you. I'm going to tell HR that, and I'm going to tell them you said that as well. And then see how that works for you. And some people do get away with it. Some people get away with it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's unfortunate.
It's untouchable, like Elliot Ness.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. But there is something freeing with being able to sit there with a C-suite executive who's earning 100 times more a year than I do.
Yeah.
And being able to just look at them and just say, you want to do this work? Great. Let's go to work. You don't, I'm out of here. Goodbye. There's something really freeing about doing that.
Oh, that's funny.
I'm in a position to do that, by the way.
Yeah.
Now, if I were not a straight white guy, it would be a different conversation. Okay. Because it very often I don't know how else to put it. Statistically speaking, it's your straight white guys that I'm dealing with. And they have a certain listening for me. But if it's a woman of color sitting opposite of them trying to do this coaching, it's a whole different kettle of fish, because the way they see that person is completely different, regardless of how open and honest they are and all that kind of stuff. It's a different listening. Now, that other person, that other coach might say exactly the same thing that I say, but the way it's heard can be different. Now, I know I have colleagues that sit on my advisory council. They're far better coaches than me. Women and people of color, far better coaches than me. And they are able to get through to these guys in a way that I can't. So isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that are attached to the way that you perceive the world around you, I guess.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And there's one other thing I want to mention
is
I will sometimes bring up, I'll ask them a question fairly early on. I'll say, do you believe in a higher power? And they'll either say yes, no, or why are you asking me that question? And if they do, I will use a very ancient kind of positioning on this. I'll say, look, sometimes our higher power puts us in a situation where we need to learn to become humble and learn.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is one of those situations. And that will often crack the ice
Mm-hmm.
with someone who believes in a higher power. If they don't, then I'm going to appeal to their sense of decency, to their civility, to what they want to do in the world.
Sure.
Sometimes I'll go to a place. Do you want to be known around here as a total asshole? Do you really want people not wanting to work with you? Is that what you want?
Is that the legacy that you want to leave here?
Exactly. Yeah, I go to that legacy conversation. That's a good way to put it. And 9 times out of 10, they say, no, of course not. But everybody's too sensitive. And I'm saying, hang on. And here's where 20 plus years of doing this work, I'll say, look, give me 5 minutes. I'll find out something in you. You think you're so tough. I will find out something about you. And I will push that button and you will explode. You will lose it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, you can't do that to me. And the only people I haven't been able to do that, I have Navy SEALs. I live in San Diego. I have Navy SEALs as buddies. I could say the most offensive things to them and they just laugh and chuckle because they're trained.
Yeah.
They are trained to deal with with abuse that most of us can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they give it to each other.
That's awesome. Greg, what advice would you give to a new coach who's just starting out?
Find your niche. What are you excited about?
Mm-hmm.
Some people are really good at helping people change careers, for example. Are you a career coach? Or a developmental coach? Some people are like me. You're all about developing the interpersonal skills, interpersonal communication, solving complex emotional challenges. Are you good at that? Are you good at coaching people on the nuts and bolts of business?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a numbers person? Can you help? What's your niche? Find your niche, what really excites you, and coach in that niche. Because when I started coaching 20 years ago,
mm-hmm.
there weren't that many executive coaches out there. Now there's tons of them. So what makes you different? Are you an expert in your industry? Now I've happened to coach in every industry, from pharmaceuticals to construction to law to corrections, you name it, I've coached in it. But some folks are coming out of a company as experts in, like, say, human resources. So
mm-hmm.
what industry are they a HR expert in wanting to become a coach?
Mm-hmm.
And so you can build your niche inside of an industry that you're mostly familiar with, technology, what have you.
Nice. I love it. Greg, is there anything else that you would like to chat about that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, I think at the end of the day, I always like to remember what Maya Angelou said at the end of her career when she was being interviewed by a journalist who said to her, Maya, you have done so much in your life. You've met so many people. You've accomplished so much. What have you learned about human beings in the course of your life? And she said, I have learned that people will forget what you did, and people will forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that's a lesson that we all should take to heart. People will never forget how you made them feel. Life is too short to have people going through life thinking that you're a jerk, mm-hmm. that you're disrespectful. Life is way too short. You don't have to be Mr. Nice Guy, but being respectful actually does make a powerful difference in their lives and in yours.
That's brilliant, man. I have heard that quote before and did not know who it was attributed to. That's hard to beat.
Yeah. Especially Maya, all that she went through. Absolutely.
Good stuff. Greg, you have a complimentary consultation around coaching for respect.
Yes.
For the first 2 listeners who join your community at CRL. Tell us a little bit about that.
Correct. All they have to do is go to respectfulleadership.org and click on the tab marked community. and sign up for that. And we see them come in, and the first 2 listeners will get a complimentary, no selling, just coaching session with me.
Awesome. And so they'll have to let you know that they heard from the Remarkable Coach podcast, something like
Correct.
that. Okay.
Yep. There's a little form they fill out, and it asks for that information.
Beauty. We'll make sure to get that link up on the show notes as well. Gregg, where else can our listeners and viewers connect with you online?
They can connect. They just do a Google search on respectful leadership, and CRL will pop up. My name, Gregg Ward, will pop up. And you can reach me through the center's website very easily.
Awesome. Gregg Ward, thank you so much for your time. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, man. And thank you to our viewers and listeners as well. We'll see you guys next time. Cheers.